This is a short suggestion video for anyone who's giving a scripted speech that they're going to practice, but not necessarily memorize. I'm going to share in this video some of the best tips that I can give based on a decade of watching students figure out the best ways to present to an audience of interested listeners. And I'm drawing on my experience, and I'm also drawing on the experience of course, those who taught me. But I ran over what I have here with my colleague and holding history co-director, Sarah Marty, who is the director of the Bolt Center for Arts Administration in the University of Wisconsin Madison School of Business. So you're getting a little bit of collected wisdom here. I call it six P's of presentation proficiency. We're going to start off with professionalism. Your presentation should convey expertise and care. One of the biggest things that I see is a kind of almost self-protective, lackadaisical attitude towards speeches. In a speech where you're going to have a fully scripted speech and then you're going to go to an outline, you really have the time to create a script that has an arc that takes us somewhere from point A to point B. And you have an audience who's listening, and they want you to do that. You're taking their time, and they want you to bring them on a journey. So my advice is to script formal and sprinkle informal. Bring in some humor. Everybody loves a little humor, but your default tone is going to be formal. Being overly casual is always a problem. It shows a sort of disrespect for your audience. Dress the part. So for me, I couldn't do this video in a t-shirt. It wouldn't feel the same to me. And I often give big lectures and I always wear a suit jacket. It's not because I certainly feel a need, like somebody has to wear a suit jacket. I don't need somebody else who's presenting to me to wear a suit jacket for a lecture or a talk. But for me, it's a costume. And in some ways, it's armor. It's me dressing the part. And so I encourage you, as part of your professionalism, is sort of think about the character, think about your part, think about your costume, and dress for that role so that you feel really confident in that role. Maybe it's even sort of another version of you that you are costuming for your presentation. And then I'd encourage you in terms of professionalism. Again, you have that arc, you have it scripted, you've taken the time to script it and then learn it a little bit and maybe outline it. It's great to recap at the end. But one of the mistakes I sometimes see, especially when something isn't well scripted, is that the points keep getting repeated. And the conclusion is not really a recap so much as a restating of every single point that's been made. So bring it all together. Next up, we're going to talk about posture. Look what I'm doing right now. So I'm hunched over, I'm rocking back and forth. Here's what I want you to think about doing. Plant your feet on the floor. Planting your feet on the floor is not only going to improve your posture, but it's also going to include both the volume and the quality of your voice. You see the difference? It also projects just sort of capability. You know what you want to say. You're invested in it. And you're not hunched over, but you're sitting up straight and showing that kind of confidence in the work that you've prepared. So when you sit down, just take a moment to breathe and to sit up straight. I think also that planting your feet is one of the best ways to limit nervous movement. And that's why in my own scripts or outlines, I always have notes to self throughout, maybe 3 or 4 different places at intervals throughout a script saying, are your feet planted? Breathe, sit up straight. These little reminders to myself that I'm obviously not going to read, but that I can use to keep thinking about how I'm presenting to the audience visually. Right? And then I would encourage you, when you're working with a script or even an outline, to use a hard copy and not a screen. There's a tendency with screens, we sort of kind of have to get close to them. We bend over them. We tend to hunch. We do tend to hunch over our devices. And with paper, you can sort of hold it out here, however it is in front of you. Sort of hold it out. There's something about that hard copy that allows us to get a little bit better posture, limits nervous movement, helps us project, and helps improve the quality of our voice. As you project, look at that back wall. One of the best pieces of advice that I received from one of the actors at American Players Theater is to imagine my voice, my words, as arrows that need to stick in the back wall. I don't want to be yelling so much that they're bouncing off the back wall, but I want them to stick. And so you kind of think about the space that you're in. And then if you're not sure about your volume, it's totally okay. And I think it's actually best practice to ask something like, to those further back, how's my volume? To our question of, or I think a concern about best practice, I would say it's best not to look at anyone in particular and say, can you hear me? And to single somebody out and ask them about their own personal capability for hearing, but just sort of generally ask to those further back, how's my volume? It gives the audience a chance to respond and to engage. It also gives them a chance to know that you're concerned about them as an audience. Our third P is going to be pacing. Don't speak your presentation, share it. Give your words space to land, articulate them, pause at appropriate moments, settle into a speed that's comfortable for you and for your audience. I've noticed again in reading Shakespeare with a lot of actors, especially some friends here at the American Players Theater in Wisconsin, that the slowest readers are the professional readers, professional actors. When I read Shakespeare, I tend to kind of rush through, and they take time for the words to land. So think about your breath. And if you need to, script in a little note to yourself that says, breathe. Believe that we want to hear what you have to say. You've prepared it for us, and we want to hear it. When you're giving a presentation, especially you've scripted a presentation, we should almost hear those paragraphs. We should feel that your words are landing. And by the way, if you script in humor, pause, put a note to yourself in there to pause. If you have a joke and you pause, often people will laugh. If you sort of put a little humor and keep going, people don't quite know what to do and they don't want to interrupt you. One of the big mistakes people make is they script humor in and then they don't give people space to respond to their humor. So really think about that pacing and give your words the room to land and your audience a chance to respond to them. Number 4, let's talk about precision. Use the proper terminology for the subject you discuss. You're going to establish credibility by doing that. And also by using unique, interesting words, you're going to help your audience remember your talk. Because in the Holding History program, we're so often showing old books to people. Let me use that as an example. If you have a book and you're looking at those first pages and there's a book plate on the paste down or a handwritten inscription on the flyleaf. So there I've used some terminology, book plate, paste down, inscription, flyleaf. You want to use that kind of language instead of saying, there's kind of some writing in the first few pages. People will understand both approaches, but they'll understand what you mean in both situations. But you also give them terminology in the second, and you'll establish that credibility that you know what these things are called. By the way, we all have to look up terminology, and especially if you're working with old books, the wonderful thing about that is you have these librarians as resources. You can ask them, what do you call this feature of the book? And of course, you can do that with any other presentation you might be given, whether it's doing scientific a presentation, talk to somebody in the lab you're working in, and make sure that you know that terminology. In addition to using that terminology, you're also providing contextual clues by providing dates and details. The main point is that you're showing that you've done the research. Let me add one little tidbit for those of you who are presenting with old books. In addition to using the proper terminology, another way to establish your expertise and your credibility is to show that you know how to handle the item. So when you're working with, say, a rare book, be sure to handle the item with care. Don't rub over the text block or an image on the text. Don't pick it up off the support that's there to help with the binding. If you want to point to something in the book, use your finger and maybe hover above instead of using a pencil that is going to make somebody worry you're going to write in the book. Right? You're establishing the fact that you know how to work with this example that you're using to discuss your subject. Key number 5 is punctuality, and it's one that really matters to me. In a recording like this, I make it as long as I want it to make it, and you watch as much or as quickly as you want to watch, but in a setting where there's a limited amount of time and others are also presenting. When you go overtime, you take time from others. If you care, and I mean this, if you care about equity and equitability, don't take more time than is allotted for you. One of the best ways that you can show that you care about others is to take the time to script and make sure that you fit within the limits that you've been given. So here's how do you do that? The rule of thumb is 1 page of double spaced 12-point Times New Roman takes approximately 2 minutes to speak. And depending on your speech patterns, 2 to 2.5 minutes. Okay, but let's say it's roughly 2 minutes for 1 page of double spaced 12-point Times New Roman font. So if you have a 5-minute speech and your script is more than 2.5 pages, you're being unfair to the others around you. You're taking up someone else's time. And so I encourage you to make sure as you script to look at that and make sure you're following those guidelines. If on top of that, you need to use any sort of equipment, you have slides or you have an overhead cam that sometimes we'll show rare books on an overhead cam. You should probably also factor in an extra 30 seconds that you're going to lose to technology. Don't be surprised when you lose time to technology. It happens. You can expect it to happen. And if you're going to be considerate of those around you, you script in such a way so that even when there are slight technological failures, not major ones, people understand that, but slight technological failures, glitches, delays, you still end with plenty of time for those who are going after you to give their full presentation. Number 6, people awareness. It's not a real word, but if the silly attempt to get a final P in here makes you smile, then you're halfway there. Don't forget to look up, to look around the room, to pause, to smile, and to engage your audience. Audiences love to feel seen. Have you ever been at a concert where you felt like the star musician looked at you, smiled, maybe waved? Audiences love to feel seen. Also, your eyes are really going to show your enthusiasm and your curiosity, and that's contagious when you show that to other people. If you want to take this to the next level, you can think about eye dominance or ocular dominance. Yours may be different from mine, so here's how you figure that out. You hold your hands in a circle at arm's length, and you look at something. I'm going to look at a sticky note on the back wall over here. And when I have both of my eyes open, I can see that sticky note. When I close my left eye, with my right eye open, I can still see the sticky note in the same place it was, more or less. When I close my right eye, the note disappears. It shifts over. What does that mean? Well, when I had my right eye open, I saw the same thing as when I had both eyes open. I'm right eye dominant. You might be left eye dominant. But what that means is that if I'm talking to a group and you are sitting to my right, I'm going to be looking at you a lot more. If you're sitting to my left, sorry, I'm going to forget you're over there. I'm going to forget to look at you because my right eye is dominant. And so if you want to take it to the next level, you can put a little note in your script, as I do sometimes, to say, look left, include the people over there, because they're as important as the people on the right, even though your biology is not reminding you of that. So that's just a little advanced tip that you can use if you want to really include and think about people awareness and draw others into the room. Last thing I will say about people awareness, when you're not presenting, be the audience you want to see in the room. Have a notebook out, take notes, make eye contact, smile, nod. I can't tell you from years of looking at an audience how much of a difference it makes to find those people in the audience who are looking and listening and following along and engaging. Be that person when you're in the audience.